Now we go on to our next speaker, Tetsu Maruyama, who's the Executive Director of ADDI, the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative, and its Workbench. It's a cloud-based platform for scientists to accelerate discoveries and to innovations for Alzheimer's disease and for related dementias. So it's a new global effort and aims to advance Alzheimer's disease innovation, connecting researchers with data that's needed to generate insights. And as we all know, to inform improvement treatments and diagnostic tools, that's so important. So thank you, Tetsu. Thanks for being with us. And we look forward now to your contribution.
Thank you, Deirdre. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to have the opportunity. I hope my slides are going to be presented centrally. While I'm waiting for that, just to say, the opportunity here is to introduce this new collaboration, which is the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative. Many of the things I'm going to talk about are things you heard from the previous presenters, which is essentially we need data sharing for Alzheimer's disease. The more we can share, the more likely we are to overcome some of the barriers that have been holding us back for a significant amount of time. The ADDI is a global initiative. It's actually based in collaboration with Gates Ventures in Seattle in the US. I am speaking to you from my home in Japan. And of course, the data that we are already sharing and intend to continue to share with the global community involves a number of European countries and initiatives as well. So truly a global undertaking. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So what I want to do really, and this is going to be a very high level presentation, my focus is going to be on our mission and our plans rather than our accomplishments, because frankly, we are a very new organization and our accomplishments can be collapsed into just a brief slide or two. So what I want to tell you first is what is the ADDI and why is the ADDI? Can I have the next slide, please? In his Gates Notes blog in November 2017, when Bill Gates announced to the world that he was going to make Alzheimer's disease a key focus of his efforts and his philanthropy, he laid out 5 elements, 5 things that we need to do in order to make the progress that we haven't yet made to help people with dementia. We need to understand the disease itself better and how it unfolds. The biology of Alzheimer's and the biology of the brain is still more opaque to us than we'd like it to be. We need to be better at detecting and diagnosing Alzheimer's disease, not just earlier, but really at all, because right now diagnosis is limited and the biomarkers and the tools that we would use in order to do that are not as developed as they are in other diseases and as we would need them to be. We need more approaches to stopping the disease. There's been a considerable amount of effort over the past 20 years focused on 1 or 2 ideas. We are now beginning to test more ideas and resources are flowing into those other opportunities. We need to make it easier for people to get enrolled in clinical trials. Clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease are far too expensive and take far too long. But really what I want to highlight here is Mr. Gates' 5th point, which is that we need to use data better. There is a significant amount of data out in the world that could help us to generate new hypotheses and test those hypotheses around Alzheimer's disease, but we're not making best use of it. And so for that reason, the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative was created. And the next slide, please. The ADDI was created as a partnership, and I won't call out every name here, but it's important to say that the members, the partners in this institution come from all over the world. They represent philanthropy. They represent national research councils, the Medical Research Council in the UK, research charities such as the Wellcome Trust. They represent organizations that are currently running platforms that are hosting Alzheimer's disease data such as GAIN and the Alzheimer's Association, the Critical Path for Alzheimer's disease, Dementia Platforms UK, and also organizations that are already experienced in the technical aspects of sharing data. In particular, our partnership with Iridia Digital Research Environment has been an incredibly fruitful one for us. All of these organizations are pulling together in order to address three key areas, which are outlined on the next slide. Again, none of these are new ideas. We heard them from the really excellent presentations from our first two speakers. The first component of the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative was enabling interoperability of existing data. So there's a lot of data out there. They're out there in different platforms, and the ability for a researcher who wants to ask a question to be able to use data from different studies, different platforms, different data contributors is limited right now, and we wish to address that issue. The second is to increase the sharing of dementia-related data, both from academic sources and from industry. In order for us to take the most advantage of data that exists, people who own the data should be encouraged to share. We have a lot of people coming forward right now who are interested in sharing data, but the more we can do that and the more we can create a community and an environment where it is the default that one shares one's data as broadly as possible, the more we're going to be able to make progress. And I think if we are able to meet those first two goals of interoperability and increased data sharing, then we ought to be able to make progress on the third goal, which is to empower cutting-edge scientists around the world to use those data and platform. We need to build an enabling environment that incorporates much of what we heard from the first two speakers about the legal and governance aspects of data, as well as ease of use and the number of tools that are available. Obviously, it's great if experienced data scientists are using these data, but what we really want are scientists and really any interested individual who has a good question to ask to be able to use that environment, both to have the permission to do so and to have the knowledge and the tools to do so. The next slide, please. Graphically demonstrates the status quo. If you are a researcher who has a question, if you are a data scientist who has code, if you're a contributor who has data, there are ways that you can share those data with the community. But for right now, data sharing equals data copying, and that's something that is both wasteful and potentially dangerous. The security is lower. The more different platforms you have, the more different places where the data live or are being shared, the more risk is involved in that. Obviously, the more people are copying data, the more infrastructure is required. And all of this encourages the siloing of research onto islands, because it's not possible to bring a tool or a number of tools to all of these islands at the same time. What we want as a goal when ADDI has enabled the community is a larger environment in which all of these data and all of the tools are available within the same sandbox on the same large island. So whether you have a question, whether you have code, or whether you have data, we would like to provide better access, increased security and auditing, because these can be centralized within a safer environment. We can share computing and infrastructure better, and thus encourage the collaboration that's going to lead to breakthroughs. And the next slide shows us again the desired outcome, but also the beginnings of the tool that the ADDI is providing to the community, which is the AD Workbench. Again, we have our users with a question, with code, or with data. In the initial pilot, working in close collaboration with Dementia Platforms UK, with the Global Alzheimer's Association network, with the Critical Path for Alzheimer's Disease, we have created data sets on the AD Workbench that are available for sharing now. As a goal moving forward, we intend to both add new platforms to that, and this is ongoing efforts right now, and also enable the contribution of new datas into the existing platforms and with new platform. In order to make this data usable, within the Workbench are a suite of APIs. which will cover everything from metadata summaries, data discoverability, various models for ontology and curation of the data, federated queries, etc. Ultimately, the idea is to be able to put these things together in a private, personalized workspace in which the data can be analyzed, but not removed. And I think this is very important for security, is that however the data comes into that workspace, it can be analyzed. The tools that are available through the Workbench can be used on any of those. And then results, when they're passed through an airlock, can be published or shared. But the data themselves will never leave that workspace. The next slide, please, is just to introduce the key tools and features of the AD Workbench that are in progress or existing right now. The next slide, just a reminder of the 3 levels of data sharing, which are intended both to maximize security for the data providers and also comfort, if you will, for the data providers to ensure compliance with any local laws or regulations, but also to improve data access for researchers. Some of the data on the Workbench will be available in a centralized or level 0 manner, in which the data and the metadata are both on the AD Workbench cloud platform, which is an Azure cloud. Other data will be in a distributed form, in which the data and the metadata are hosted on premises or even on a different cloud by the data owner. Metadata can be queried remotely, and selections of data are pseudonymized and then transferred into these trusted ADDI personalized workspaces. For others, where even that level of security is insufficient, we will have a federated approach in which the data and metadata stay on the host. The metadata can be queried remotely, but the record level data itself never travels. And we're building Docker communities in order to enable the federated data that will allow analyses and then the removal of results from those, again, back into the workspace. I'll go very quickly through the next slide just to say the immediate focus for our development on authentication and authorization. Harmonization, obviously, is a key issue. The more data you bring in, and this has been mentioned by previous speakers, the more of a headache harmonization becomes, but it's critical to being able to use the data effectively. Metadata search, we want to build a knowledge base because we really are engaged in building a community, not just a tool or a platform. Data use, auditing, visualization. The data can be raw, curated, structured, cataloged, indexed, and etc. In the interest of time, can we skip 2 slides forward, please, just to show the status of the Workbench right now. We launched in November. We have over 700 registered users with workspaces allocated to them so far from many, many different places around the world. And I will say that I had a personal lesson in data harmonization and putting this slide together when trying to identify that the United States of America, the US, the USA, and America were all actually referring to the same thing, as well as making decisions about whether England and Scotland belong separately or in the United Kingdom. But nonetheless, the important thing is it is global in reach already, and we intend both to bring in data globally and also users to the Workbench globally. The next slide, please. I'd like to say that we have hundreds of data sets currently available. To be honest with you, right now we have 7 data sets available, 5 of which are synthetic data, and I haven't talked about that, but it's an important component of what we're doing as we build out the database, that we are creating synthetic data that will allow certain features to be done and certain models to be created without risk to even pseudonymized data. 2 of the data that we have are longitudinal cohort studies of healthy aging, and others are clinical trial data. 5 of the existing 7 data sets right now are from UK, 2 of the US, but we're actively involved with the IMI in identifying and moving more European-based data sets into the Workbench. We currently have 8 pilots initiated with data contributors in Europe, US, and India. and discussion with an additional more than 25 unique data sets, including placebo-controlled trials, longitudinal cohort studies, and biomarker discovery trials. Just in conclusion, on the next slide, please, in launching the AD Workbench, Bill Gates reminded us that data is a tremendously powerful tool. It can be harnessed to understand and reduce the impact of AD, and it's what the AD Workbench is designed to do. So with support from global competitors, we are dedicated to the goal of making as much data as possible available to as many researchers as possible. And in launch of the AD Workbench, we are looking for a tool that will fit into the Alzheimer's community, work with existing databases, existing platforms and functions to democratize data around Alzheimer's disease. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Great, Tetsu, thank you very much for your time and for a truly global initiative. It's wonderful to see the amount of countries that are involved, and probably a lesson for you in geopolitics that we could have for another day, but really very encouraging to see that you're engaging, and there's so many contributors from across the globe.